Hey everyone, welcome to the Rise and Above podcast, a platform for you to share your story. Oftentimes, we all have something that happens to us in life and we have no way of sharing. Many people want an outlet, whether it's writing a book or going on a massive networking platform or starting an inspirational social media account. With the Rise and Above platform, anyone with an inspiring, motivating, or interesting story can come on and share. It could be anything from the struggles of starting a business, the struggles of overcoming homelessness or mental illness. I've interviewed victims of rape, sexual assault, and abuse. There is no subject that is off limits. This platform offers a safe and fun way for you to share your story through a one-on-one experience. If you would like to share your story, the best way to reach out would be through social media. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook or through email. All the links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for listening. To the Rise and Above podcast. My name is David Hess, and today I have Mike Marriott. Did I say that right?
Marriott, yep.
Marriott. He is the owner of the Art Collective here in Lansing. No, not owner.
Nope. Opportunity Arts. We have an auditorium at the Art Collective.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
It
happens all the time. People get confused on, there's like, I don't want to sound like the guys in Monty Python. But it's like, is this the Judean People's Front? No, it's People's Front of Judea. It's, so Opportunity Arts.
Okay.
Yep.
So, wow, that totally ruined my intro.
No worries.
You want to tell me a little bit about yourself? Are you from the Lansing area?
I'm not.
Where are you from?
I was born in Peoria, Illinois originally.
Okay.
Went to college in Texas. Did some work in St. Louis.
Where'd you go in Texas?
West Texas A&M University.
Okay.
So if
what'd you study?
Originally I went as a dance major. So I did tap dancing.
Were you a dancer?
I was a dancer. Yep.
Wow. So did you grow up dancing?
Yep. I was a hyper toddler.
Did you ever get made fun of for that?
Oh God, yeah. Oh sure. Yeah, no. So, yeah, my sexual orientation was always questioned. And, yeah, of course, because it was.
But you probably got all the ladies.
The 80s and 90s. Well, that was the thing. When I was 12 years old, I was like, because if you're a guy in dance, like they put you in the because there's not a lot of guys, so they try to foster that, right? So I was like 12 years old, and I was in a room with like 23, 14, 15-year-old girls, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm a genius. Okay, so everybody's like, oh, and they'd make fun of you, and I'd be like, laugh it up. And then I had a couple of friends that I actually took to one of my dance recitals, like 10 guys from my school, and I was like, just come check it out. And then they saw me with all these different girls who were a couple of years older, and they were like, what? And then they just stopped making fun of me after that. Funny how that worked out. They were like, oh. And then one they were like, what are you guys doing tonight? Where you go? Like suddenly they wanted to be like invited to the stuff.
That's hilarious.
Like,
So what made you want to do dance?
I mean, it wasn't anything. I mean, I was 4. My mom made that decision.
So, she made you.
She's just like, well, if she put me in dance, and I guess like that was around the same time. I'm totally aged myself. That was around the same time that like Thriller came out and everything.
Oh, okay.
And so like I just would watch that over and over, and I guess I was trying to do like the the little zombie shuffle thing that they were doing in there. And my mom's like, you know what? He's hyper. Let's put him in dance. Which then I was kind of like, you gave me tap shoes. Like, why would you give a hyper kid something? I can make more noise. So, and that was the thing. I did tap. I didn't do like any of the others originally. I did tap. And then I started doing jazz because about 8 or 9, they're like, oh, you do jazz. And then I wasn't doing ballet because I knew what was going to happen with that. And then I got in high school, and they're like, and I really didn't in high school and grade school, I didn't really care about my grades because I just liked dancing and I played sports. My dad's a football coach, and so I was doing all that. And then it was in college, they were like, I met Jo Rowan at a dance convention, and she runs the dance program at Oklahoma City University. And she was like, you can major in dance in college. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. And then they were like, oh, you're a guy? Here's scholarship money.
Wow.
And then it was, oh, this is because I wasn't getting into college on my grades.
Right.
That wasn't happening.
Right.
And so it was like a ticket to go to college, and I was like, okay, well, all right, so then, but in that aspect, then it was, I needed to learn ballet, because they're like, we need you to partner the girls. And I was like, okay, so I'm like kicking and screaming in ballet class, like I'm trying to be all like, because it was the, mid to late 90s. And, there at the time, it was just kind of like, oh, you're doing ballet, you're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to college. Like,
right. Right.
And so, I mean, and then that was the reason I was able to go to college was on a dance scholarship.
That's awesome. So did you follow that at all after college?
So what happened was, what's funny is so growing up, I did a lot of dance competitions, and again, this was back. So we're talking 80s and 90s. This is back when like you would lose, like when like that's back when it wasn't like everybody gets a trophy.
Participation.
Right? Like those weren't a thing. Like, and so it was one of those things where it was like you would go and you would compete, and it was just like sports where it was like there were winners and losers. It was first, second, third, gold, silver, bronze. That's it. Now, if you go to these competitions, they're like elite gold, ultimate platinum, and I'm like, they're gonna make carbonite. That's the next. It's like, and this thing that Han Solo was frozen in, like that'll be the next award. But I went to college and I loved competing. I loved playing sports. Like I said, my dad was a football coach. I played football and stuff in high school, and like. So getting into college, there was still the performing, like it fed the performing like part that I loved, but there was outside of auditioning for a part, and then once that audition was over, there was no more competing. And I was like, I miss competing. I really miss competing because I'm just super competitive. Like if we went out, I saw the basketball, like we're playing, we're playing and taking it seriously. But I got into college and there wasn't an aspect to compete, but then I kind of discovered arts administration and arts promotion. And it was, did you sell out the show? Did you get the grant? Did your artist get booked over another artist for a gig? And suddenly there were all those competitive measurables again.
Right.
And I went, oh, that's how I feed both. And so then I went into arts administration, and that's what I've been doing now for the last 2 decades.
So then how did you end up in New York City?
So, let's see. I graduated, I went home. I was teaching dance in St. Louis. Because that was kind of the next step was like, teaching, which is basically like to put it in like, so if people are listening that don't like know about the arts. So teaching dance was kind of like coaching sports.
Right.
And then arts administration is basically like the assistant general manager or head of scouting or whatever it was.
Right.
So, I was in St. Louis and I was teaching dance, and I had gotten my undergrad and my master's from Texas, and they had actually let me do some recruiting and stuff there at the school. And anyway, I was teaching dance or whatnot, and there was this one competition, Legacy Dance Championships, and I had been sending out my resume to kind of judge at different competitions. And this guy was like, do you want to just come on and be our office manager and whatnot? And I'm like, and it's a ticket to New York. I'm going to New York because that's the goal, right? Like you're in performing arts, like if you wanted to be, it's like, I think it's a John Lennon quote that was, if you lived in the time of the Romans, you would have wanted to be in Rome.
Right.
So that was the concept was, okay, well, I'm going to go to New York. And then I got that job and I went to New York, and that's where I met my wife. She is a born and raised Long Islander.
Does she still talk that way?
Oh yeah. So, and it's so funny too, because like her accent, everybody hears it here, because coffee, dog, water, draw. But our friend Stefano Andreotti, who's this like phenomenal opera singer who just moved here from New York too, his mom came and visited, and she her Long Island accent was fresh.
No.
Like it was just, oh my God, thank you so much for everything you do for me. Like it was just that voice, But my wife's funny because if like we checked out some wineries and stuff over the weekend when we went up north. You put a little bit of wine in her, that accent gets a little bit thicker, and then it's what are you talking about? And then it comes out. So there's times that a lot of my friends will just sit and wait, and they'll like be like, they'll be like, get her going, like, so.
That's hilarious. So
I totally forgot what question you asked that led to that.
I asked how you got to New York City, and you answered it. So you were working as an office manager
at a dance competition.
At a dance.
Yep.
Okay.
And then met my wife, left that job, and then I was gonna do I'm just gonna do like the regular everyday job thing, 9 to 5, whatnot. And it was like in The Godfather, where it's like every time I'm out, he pulls me back in. And did another thing where I just sent my resume out.
You do a lot of references.
I reference all the time.
You like movies, don't you?
I'm a pop culture freak.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love movies, sports, pro wrestling, tons of references and stuff. Because I think like it's weird though, because it's helped me, because like a lot of people that don't understand art or are kind of like, I can say something and they're like, oh well, that makes sense. Like, what do you mean you own a art promotion and business company? It's like being the GM of a sports team. oh yeah, okay, all right, we'll sign players. Okay, that makes sense. And it's like they suddenly, and it's I think
Right.
that might be because my dad's a football coach,
Okay.
and I got to give him a lot of my dad is my pal. Like if you meet my dad, he's basically 75-year-old me, and he can get away with everything because he's retired. um, but he was never like you would think. Oh, football coach, he's gonna shoot down. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not dancing. My son's not.
Right.
He didn't
Macho.
care. Yeah,
Macho.
no, he was like, do it, just do it. And so it was like he was so supportive, but there was a lot of things that he didn't understand,
Mm.
and so it was me explaining to him like, hey, this is, and then he would be, oh, I get it, okay. And then it's funny too because so when I was in college and I went for my graduate, like I went right into graduate school. And because it was, again, they were like, do you want to be a graduate assistant? It'll pay for your graduate school and then you can get your
Wow.
master's degree. And it's like, so they kept having this art opportunities to do this stuff. And I was like, okay, because I wasn't ready, I'm still having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we'll send you all over the country. Like, and so what basically happened was, I jumped ahead a little bit. Sorry. I have ADHD. Surprise. um, so basically, the job that I got as a graduate assistant was to be the head of scouting, marketing, and recruiting for the dance program, because it stemmed from a conversation I was having with my dad. Because he goes, you know, when college football teams want high school athletes, they send a coach or they send a scouting person. It's like they send
Mm-hmm.
somebody. Like Alabama's like, I want that. They send somebody to that school,
Right. To recruit him.
and they recruit them.
Yep.
And this had not been happening in dance. And coming from the dance competition realm, my thought was, well, if okay, we're in Amarillo, send me to a convention or a competition in Dallas, and instead of having to go to one individual school, I'm going to have 12 dance studios there at once.
Wow.
And we're going to have, and that was my dad going, why don't you guys do that? Like that was a conversation. Why doesn't dance do that? Great idea. And then the university went, yeah, let's do it. And we
Wow.
took the dance program from 6 dance majors to 30 dance majors in 2 years, and generated enough funding and support to send the entire program to Italy and Russia in back-to-back summers.
Holy cow.
So
And it's still something they do to this day.
they cut back a little bit on it. They're
Okay.
still I think now you see more integration with like Dance Magazine and things like that.
Okay.
With they have the college guide and stuff now. I still don't see where it's on site.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like if
Right.
if I'll go to a competition, even when I was working at Legacy, there wasn't the on-site recruit, which to me I'm like, you're blowing an opportunity. Because yeah, if you're Oklahoma City University or the University of Arizona, one of these awesome dance programs, and you have 500 students auditioning, no, you don't need to do that.
Right.
But if you could literally be Bradley University or something like that and be like, we want to build our program,
Mhm.
or even something local like Oakland, who has a phenomenal dance program here. Grand Valley has a great dance program. But you look at all these other universities, if they wanted to build a program, that's how you do it, like quickly. And so I think, but that's something that we'd have never stumbled on had I not been the son of a football coach.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. It's kind of cool how the two worlds collided, and then you were able to implement, what they were doing into what you were doing.
Oh yeah, no, I steal all the time from sports and wrestling. I just look and I'll go, oh, okay, and then I'll be like, what's that look like here?
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
that's pretty cool because I think the arts community is pretty undeveloped, and the sports community is fully developed. I mean, they seem to have everything down to a science as far as how they do things.
Yep, and it's funny too because, and I think that's the thing too, where like with the arts, I don't think like, to me the arts are where sports was in like the 1960s, because like people don't think about the fact that half the players on the Green Bay Packers that won the first Super Bowl had off-season jobs because playing for the
Right.
Packers did not
Right.
pay for everything.
Yep.
And nowadays we're like, what? Like if you went back in time and you just showed them Patrick Mahomes' contract, like they'd be like, this isn't real.
Yeah.
What do you mean $540 million? Like that's
Right.
that's
right.
not a realistic number.
Yep.
And so I think that's for me something that I wanted to see in the arts is, okay, we're here, we're back here, but like we can grow this, and we can grow it. It's going to take some time. Like, I'm very aware. A friend of mine had a nice quote, and it's sometimes you plant trees that you don't necessarily get to enjoy the shade from. And I think that's kind of where that's going is like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're going to build stuff now so that, people like, I know you've had Autumn on the show before, and Nat Spins, people like that, like Nat's kids, they may live in that world
Right.
where
Right.
it's, yeah, with sponsorships and everything else, you have these artists that are making
Right.
6 figures,
Right.
and I think
Yeah.
that's the start. But yeah, that's, because we're Super Bowl like mid 50s or something now.
Yeah.
Like they went from Bart Starr had $100,000 and that was like the monstrous deal at the time, and now you have Mahomes who's 540 million over 10.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
I'm gonna make a really great. I'm already a middle-aged guy, but I'm gonna make a great like middle-aged like pointless.
You're middle-aged?
references. 41. So
You don't seem like you are.
I try. I try to like. Yeah, I'm 41, but I don't know. I'm in an industry where like I get to do what I did when I was 4.
Right.
I hang out with, like I hang out and I work with all these young artists. Like you get around somebody like a Mila Lynn or a Sarah Sanders or Autumn or somebody like that, and you're just their energy. You just feed off of it,
Right.
And so for me, I think that keeps me younger.
Yeah.
My wife and I don't have kids, so
Okay.
like if we want to run off up north and or go do the breweries or something like that, like
Right.
we still have that where it's not. I guess we don't have as much of the responsibility as the traditional, people with kids and everything else. And I think that might be what keeps me a little bit younger, in the energy, not in the face and everything else.
So, what brought you to Lansing?
Funny story.
Coming from New York City.
You ready for this? Because it's a weird path.
I'm ready.
The Detroit Lions.
Oh boy.
All right. So, my grandfather was born in Owasso. He brainwashed my dad into rooting for the Lions. My dad brainwashed me into rooting for the Lions. So he waited. Like he didn't talk about my dad, football coach, didn't talk about football throughout the 80s, right? Because the Bears were good. And then in 1991, the Lions go to the NFC Championship, and my dad went, "Look, Barry Sanders," and I was like, "Wow." And so like that was it. I'm like, okay, I'm a Lions fan now. And my dad is I guess he was just raised to be all Detroit.
Oh.
So Pistons were my first like team that I loved.
Why do you think that was?
I think my grandpa. I think my grandpa just like.
Even though he's from Illinois.
Well, my grandpa was born in Owasso, from Michigan.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So your family's originally from Michigan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Everybody asked me, "Do you have family here?" And I'm like, "Yes," and they're all buried in the ground in Owasso. But we actually did an art event a couple weeks ago. There's a cabin in Owasso, Michigan, Comstock Cabin, and
I think you sent that to me.
Yeah, 185 years ago this year.
Wow.
My great grandparents came to Michigan from England.
Wow.
And stayed in that cabin.
Wow.
And then we did an event out there like to the month.
That is cool.
It was just kind of, but yeah. So for years, that's where the family was. And then my grandpa wasn't the most stable human being on the planet. He went all over the country and then ended up in Illinois. And my dad was born in Peoria. They lived in Decatur for a little bit, but that was the sports. You know what I mean? So it was Pistons, Lions, Red Wings. Pistons, Lions, Red Wings. And yeah, so being a Lion fan, you got to make a Thanksgiving Day game. I'd never been to a Thanksgiving Day game, so 2014 was the 75th anniversary of the Thanksgiving Day game, and I had told my wife, I was like, we got to go to that game. And I asked my dad if he wanted to go, and he didn't want to travel and everything, and so I was like, I'm going. And my wife and I came out here, and we just fell in love with Michigan because what was weird was, so we get here, and it's funny because the guys that we met, we got invited to a tailgate at that game because I met these two guys that are Lions fans from Detroit, at the NFL draft in New York. So I went to the NFL draft 5 years in a row, because it was at Radio City, and they're like, if you get there early enough, and it was like I was the token Lion fan because they were terrible. And so like it was hilarious because I moved to New York in '08 when they lost every game, and the only way you could watch the Lions was go to the sports bar. And so like I'd walk in, and it was like I was Bigfoot or something. Like, oh my God, it's a Lion fan. And then I'm like Highlander, like I'd see another lion. And so anyway, there's going to be a lot of sports conversation in this. But yeah, so I'd never been to a Thanksgiving Day game. We came to the game. We fell in love with it. We went to the tailgate, and we finished our cans, and we're like, is there a recycle bag or whatever? They're like, no. Go put it on the edge of the parking lot. I'm like, what? And I look, and there's these cans lined up. I'm like, okay. So like as the morning is going on, all these cans are getting piled up or whatever. And my wife's like, what are we? And they're like, oh no. So the people who are homeless or less fortunate, they come out and then they collect the cans and they can turn those in and get some money. And I was like, wow. And then they had like this whole Thanksgiving spread and whatnot, and then about 45 minutes before the game, they took that over, and then they were actually like giving food to like the homeless. And stuff.
Wow.
And it wasn't just this group; it was like a bunch of different people.
It's like the thing to do.
Yeah, and my wife and I were like, "What is this weird place?" Because in New York, it's like
it's a homeless person.
Everything, right? And everyone's just like even now, like people come up and like, "Excuse me," I just instinctively go, "I don't carry cash." Like it's just a New York. You're just going.
Right.
And like we were like, wow, like that was just okay. So that was cool. So then the next year comes around and it's like Thanksgiving again, and we're like, "Do you want to go back?" And we're like, "Yeah, let's go back." So then we came to the game next year, and then we're like, we fell in love with Michigan, and then we were like, it was my wife that goes, "What about like moving there?" And I go, "Well, hon, I work in the arts," and she goes, "They don't have the arts in Michigan." And I was like, okay, no, that makes sense. And she's like, your hero's George M. Cohan. She's like, and so George M. Cohan was called the man that owned Broadway. He literally, at one point in time, like at the beginning, it was, I want to say like 1920s, he had either a play that he had written or he owned the theater in every theater on Broadway.
Wow.
At one time. Disney has not been able to match that.
Wow.
Because Disney owns a lot of the Broadway theaters now, and they have not been able to match that. So Cohan, if you ever heard of the movie Yankee Doodle Dandy, that's the story about his life. And so he was always my hero. And my wife made a good point. She said, when Cohan came to New York, the infrastructure wasn't there. She's like, he built it. You really want to be your hero, go somewhere and build an infrastructure. Wow. And then it was like, okay. And I'm like, maybe we should go visit Michigan in the summer, because we had only been to Michigan in the winter.
Right.
So we fell in love with Michigan in the winter.
Then you should just move here.
Right. So so we came back and we looked and we started looking around and whatnot. And I discovered my family history about being in Owasso and whatnot. And then the thing that kind of jumped out about Lansing, because we were looking Detroit and Detroit suburbs. But the thing that jumped out about Lansing was it's geographically perfect because you're an hour and 45 minutes from Detroit. You're an hour from Grand Rapids. You're an hour from Ann Arbor. You're an hour and 45 minutes. I'm probably like showing how fast I drive, but I'm not pulled over all the time. But like you could get everywhere. I mean, honestly, with the time change, you're in Chicago in 3 hours.
Right.
You can have lunch in Lansing and happy hour in Chicago easily. And so that was kind of okay, let's see what this is. And then we got here, and the idea was Lansing's going to be Grand Central Station, and we'll just work all over. And then it was, there's like this crazy anomaly of talent here. And that's kind of what's grown over the last 4 years. So,
do you find that since you've been here that there's been a lot of untapped talent in our community as far as the arts?
Yes, I think it's getting a lot more tapped now.
Yeah. But
I think we're also coming up on another like kind of moment of truth for Lansing in the arts. But I think like...
What do you mean?
So kind of basically what's happening with the arts now is now everybody's kind of seeing, okay, there's these good artists. There's this, okay, so now how do we compensate this? And I think it's going from being an art scene and an art community to an art industry. And having small businesses, your Leaps, your Michigan business development companies, all those starting to recognize that these artists are creative entrepreneurs.
Right.
And, fostering an industry and what that looks like in a mid-sized city, because the industry's always existed, but the industry has existed in LA and New York, Chicago.
Yeah.
But
St. Louis, right? It's another big one.
St. Louis is it's genre specific, like with Seattle, with grunge music. When you say grunge, it's Seattle. Austin, Texas is another place too. I look at Lansing as kind of like, I always like I said, it's a competitor in me, right? So like when we were at West Texas A&M, we were this tiny little program, but like I wanted to go recruit in Tucson, like in the University of Arizona's backyard.
Wow.
Like I want to go there because you're gonna, okay. The Michigan State fans remember a couple of years ago when Michigan State beat Duke and ended Zion's career and like his college career. So like Michigan State basketball beats Duke and goes to the Final Four. The game before that, Duke almost lost to South Florida. And everybody's like, oh, dang, South Florida almost beat them. And I'm like, no, man, Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I'm like, it would be cool to beat South Florida and go to the Final Four, but you get to beat Duke and go to the Final Four and end Zion Williamson's college career? That's what you want, right? And then
Yeah.
Michigan State did it. And I was actually bartending at Buffalo Wild Wings at the time. And like that place was nuts. Like it was here and everybody was going, just go green,
Oh my
go.
gosh.
And like, I'll never forget that. But it's like, man, I don't know. It's the whole concept of a piece of candy tastes a whole lot better if you just, did a shot of vinegar. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's just more fulfilling. And so for me, that's just the competitor in me. So it was like when I was recruiting at West Texas A&M, hey, that's the gold standard. That's what we're going after. And so now I look at Lansing's art scene and I'm like, you know what? Nashville, Boston, Austin, Texas, Denver. Those are your big state capitals.
Mhm.
Atlanta,
Right.
that have these huge art scenes. They also crush us in population, but it's like per
Well,
capita,
But Lansing's growing.
Lansing's growing, and per
Significantly.
capita, Atlanta has 5 million people. Yeah, you better have the art scene that's big.
Right.
It's like New York. You have
Yeah.
9 million people. Yes, you should have that size art scene.
Yeah.
Lansing, we have 118,000 in the city and then 500,000 in the MSA, which Metropolitan Statistical Area. So like, if you look at that, like what we have talent-wise for the size of our population,
Mhm.
I think is even greater than what they have. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Because Austin has 9 million people, or 900,000 people. Atlanta has 5 million. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not
Right.
sure Nashville, but you have these other places.
Right.
Their population is bigger.
Right.
But for our population, I think that's the other thing too, that when I said it's that crossroad,
Yep.
we now have all this big talent coming up, and it's like, okay, how do we get everybody compensated properly?
Right. So, what is your goal with the art community as far as having everybody be compensated, not constipated?
That'll probably happen too. It depends.
What is your goal with the industry?
So for me, so are you meaning for Opportunity Arts individually, or for Lansing, or?
For Lansing as a whole, for the artists in our community, in the surrounding communities, and I guess in our state, because by you bringing up our arts community here in Lansing, it's going to affect the whole state.
Right.
Or everywhere.
Well, and I think too that's the other thing now that like we had talked about when we originally came here. Well, you can get everywhere else.
Right.
Like, you look at somebody like Mila Lynn. Her work, she did the Black is King project at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
That was here, and now it's at Art Prize.
Wow.
So now she's going to she'll go to Grand Rapids and do an event, and then Tori Gray comes up from Detroit, and then some of our artists go down there, and so now we're building these pipelines within.
Right.
Because there's a lot of artists that I've said to, I'm like, Lansing is growing, and we're developing this into what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we all still have to eat and survive.
Right.
And so,
Which, speaking of which, people hear, like your title, they probably assume that this is all you do. They probably think that you make a lot of money from this, and you don't. You actually work other jobs just to make this happen.
Yep. It's the artist in me, and I think that's the other thing too that happens in the arts. That's why the shirt, if other professions were paid like artists. It's, this one is like, I didn't get paid for this surgery per se, but the patient assured me it'd be great exposure, Any other industry, it's disrespectful. Almost.
Yeah.
Like if you approached a plumber and said, listen, my toilet is broken. Like $25, like, what do you think? Or if a plumber came in and said, and I think it also goes back on the artist too, because if a plumber came in and said, what do you think me fixing your bathroom is worth?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Right.
no, it's like, hi, would you like to go to the bathroom inside and not have to use an outhouse? Or
Right.
Here's what it costs you.
Right. I think the difference between that is art isn't really like a necessity. Like, I mean, you have it in your house. It's more of a luxury, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to hang a picture up in your house or to buy a piece of art.
Right. It is a luxury to a sense.
Yeah.
But again, we go, everybody has some sort. You can't get through your day without experiencing art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You don't meet anybody today who doesn't own a television,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of
Music is an art.
right?
Yeah.
And I think too, that's the other thing too. Now we're starting to talk about stuff locally, like our local hospitality, our local businesses, our local retail, our local restaurants. We should also focus on our local talent. You know what I mean? Because you have people that are just as talented here as the people that are in LA, New York,
Right.
all those different places, but they're right down the street.
Right.
I always
And they shouldn't have to go to New York or Chicago or LA to try to make it.
Right.
To try to, become something in the art. Can't talk today. It's been a problem lately.
We're good. Cheers.
Cheers.
There you go.
I should have had beer. You like beer, so.
Oh yeah.
You shouldn't have to go to these different big cities and completely change your lifestyle in order
Mhm.
to try to make it in the arts community.
Right. And I think that's like, I don't know, for me, that's, I guess, the goal. Lude said the original question was, what's the goal for Lansing? I think to be the creatives capital. I'm optimistic, and I'm somebody who I like to be the new thing. You know what I mean? And gate and so for Lansing, everybody always talks about like, oh well, let's study best practices and this and that and this. I'm like, man, screw that. We're creative. Let's make our own damn best practices.
Right.
Like, what does a mid-sized city with a thriving art scene community industry look like?
Mm-hmm.
Let's build the blueprint.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And if everybody else picks up on it, cool. And if everybody else doesn't, cool.
Yep.
But let's not be afraid to be like, yeah, we're awesome. And I think that's another thing too with a lot of artists, like having that confidence
Mm-hmm.
and building that confidence of, like, you can do something that other people can't do.
Right.
And I think, like, again, you look at pro athletes, what they make. And of course, it's the same type thing. You have people who are like, I could do that. It's like, no, you couldn't. Like, I'd love to play in the NFL. I would love to be a pro wrestler.
Yep.
Brock Lesnar would kill me in 30 microseconds. Like, it would just, like, I would walk into the ring and die. That's what would happen. And they're like, I could do that. No, there's intense years of training
Mm-hmm.
and everything else that goes into that. Whether you're doing art as like therapy for yourself or whether you're doing it to be like, look at how badass I am. You know what I mean? There's still that putting in the work. And I think sometimes people go, oh, well, I painted this pretty picture. I'm an artist. And it's like, you're a hobbyist. I mean,
At best.
like, right. And it's disrespectful,
Right.
in my opinion. And that's just, I can only speak for myself. It's disrespectful to me when someone is like, oh, I wrote some lyrics down on a piece of paper. I'm a poet. It's like, you haven't put in the work.
Right.
Like, to be that level that people are going to take their hard-earned money and spend it on seeing you do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happened in Michigan before, because you look at Motown.
Right.
Motown is, I mean, and I think everybody hears Motown and we automatically have this thing about Motown, right? Motown, I mean, Berry Gordy's still alive. You know what I mean? He's like in his 90s, but like that was 60 years ago. And that's one of our artists that we work with, Tori Gray. I said Marvin Gaye released his first album in 1961. Tori Gray released his first album in 2021. Wow. Like, there's a synergy there because Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, The Temptations, Smokey Robinson, The Miracles, they were all kids from the neighborhood until they were Motown.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now I have a shirt from Motown, the Motown Museum. It says "The Little House That Rocked the World," and I think why
I've
not
never
do
been
it
there.
again? Oh,
I need to go. I've never been.
I went down there and it was just when we were visiting. It was the summer trip. Like, I want to go to Motown, and I also wanted to rub it in my dad's face. Like, I went to Motown. And he's like, oh, and he's like, you better. I was like, here's the shirt. And he's like, oh, okay, good. But I've called the Opportunity Arts Affiliate roster the most talented artistic roster in Michigan since Motown. And some people are like, how, clutching the pearl, and it's like, go look at the roster. Go look at the roster, and because again, 60 years from now, you're gonna go, yeah, they were just then, and then they became Mila Lynn and Tori Gray and Sarah Sanders and all them. You know what I mean? And like, that's gonna be. They were all kids from the neighborhood.
One thing I find in our local community, as far as like artists, is they're all supportive of of each other's work. Regardless, like if like I had Autumn in here, like she doesn't seem like she's really competitive with anybody. Is like it's everybody's supportive of everybody. I've seen her like share other people's artwork on Facebook and whatnot. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, so the analogy I've used. I'm gonna go back to my analogies. It's not so much I win, you lose. Right. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people, especially somebody like Autumn, like she understands, like knocking somebody down doesn't make you any taller.
Right.
Yeah. But I also think there is a little bit of almost like a home run derby where it's like, all right, the first starter bang, hits a home run. Oh, hit a home run. Great. Hey, good job. High five. The next batter's like, okay, well, you hit a home run. I'm going second deck on this. Like, boom. Right? It's like, yeah, all right, high five, high five. Now third batter's up and's like, I got to go out of the park, And
Yep.
so there's that.
But that's how you keep each other accountable, and that's how you better everything. I mean,
Yep.
if one person does good, and the next person does even better,
Yep.
then the next person does even better, and it just keeps going.
And they inspire each other.
Right.
Or they'll see, like, Mila Lynn last year did the Inktober project, which is she's doing it again this year on a grander scale than she did last year. But then Sarah Sanders, who's friends with her and in the Aces with her, saw that. And then in May, she did the Embodiment Project, which was a body paint a day in May. Inktober is a drawing a day in October. And so it was like, that's how she went, okay, what can I do this? And then, like you said, Autumn sees that, and then Autumn's like, okay, well, what's the thing I'm going to do?
Right.
And yeah, it's this, and I like that, that there is this little bit, it's friendly competition.
Yeah.
It's, in wrestling, it would be a face versus face match. But, yeah, it's just a lot of everybody. Like, I think also they understand too, like, we're trying to build this into something greater.
Right.
So.
Now, what is your goal with the local art community here in Lansing?
As far as
like the I'm sorry, what was it called again?
Opportunity Arts.
Opportunity Arts.
Yep, big megaphone. That's us. So.
What is your goal with that?
So with
first, I'm sorry. What is it?
Okay.
Because I'm sure a lot of people don't know what it is.
Yes. So we'll start from there.
Okay.
So I started a company in New York called Startup and Dance because I went into the administration. What happened was I'd worked for all these, Gelsey Kirkland Ballet, Legacy Dance Championship. I'd worked for all these other companies. And the one thing I noticed, I'd worked for a couple of nonprofits, like nonprofit arts organizations.
Okay.
And while they do a ton of good, so I just want to explain that out of the gate. What happened is you have the artistic director, and then above the artistic director is an executive director. And above the executive director is a board of directors. So the creative who's created it is like third on the totem pole. And then what happens is you have these companies, and they'll have a full-time executive director, a full-time development director, a full-time marketing director, a full-time donations person, liaison, right? And then they'll be like, let's stipend the artists. And I'm like, but without the artists, there's none of the other people are relevant. Literally the whole rest of the organization's irrelevant. And so our thought was, and we originally did it in dance in New York, was Startup and Dance was, okay, well, we're going to provide these business services and these promotional services as the artists need them. Mm. And then the creative stays at the top, and they hire us to do that work. So whether it's a press push or social media management or budget development or, producing an event, doing something like that, the artist pays us as they do that. Mm. It gives them full control. Because if we don't do a good job, guess what? They can fire us. Right?
Except there probably isn't anything like it.
And that's the thing. Even in New York, it was like it's a very new concept but I think a lot of these arts administrators are going, why am I working for these huge companies for $30,000 a year?
Right.
When I can just start my own thing.
Yep.
And I think there's plenty of artists and creative entrepreneurs now that obviously even over like the last 5 years that I've seen where, I should be at the top of my own. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen stuff too where, like, when I was in Amarillo, Texas, they had Lone Star Ballet, and the guy that founded Lone Star Ballet, I was not a fan. I didn't really like him. But he founded it. He started it. He came up with the idea.
Right.
And 40 years after he founded it, started it, and came up with the idea, the board of directors fired him. Wow. And it was gone. The thing he created, the thing he had built up, mm-hmm. and obviously people would help him, but that was his baby.
Right.
The board of directors took it from him. And it's like, and I that was one of the things I was like, I'll never have a nonprofit aspect. I love fiscal sponsorship, and it's a very boring, long conversation. But basically, fiscal sponsorship allows individual artists to accept donations like they're a 501c3. So if you donated to a fiscally sponsored project, you could write it off on your taxes the exact same way you could if you donated to a nonprofit.
Okay.
So we actually work with Pentacle in New York City. I had met them when I was working there. And any Opportunity Arts affiliate, anybody that becomes an affiliate of Opportunity Arts can opt in to fiscal sponsorship. Okay. So like you look at a company that we've worked with since, probably the beginning of their inception, the Artist Umbrella. They have a fiscally sponsored aspect because they're part of that. And so a lot
Did
of
you
people
have anything? Do you have anything to do with the creating of that?
Brandon Navin created the whole. He's the founder and executive director and created all that. But
Okay.
then basically we started working with them, and by we I mean me and my wife. It's mom, pop, and a hamster wheel. But we started working with them about their third show,
Okay.
and just basically, I joke, I have like a Hand of the King relationship with some of those. If you get Game of Thrones, so like I'm
I still
in
haven't
Brandon's
seen
ear.
that.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, me and my pop culture references. Yeah, no, this is gonna be for anybody watching it. They've turned it off if they don't like pop culture. They're already gone.
Or sports.
Right? Yeah. What? I thought it was gonna be arts. Why is he talking about wrestling? I don't know why I gave him that accent either, but anyway, we're just having fun. Yep. Nope. Train of thought's gone.
Yeah, I don't. You were talking about working with the Artist Umbrella.
That's right.
And the third show is when you and your wife got involved.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I started talking to them, and we've been doing like business consulting and stuff like that.
Okay.
And, different things like, get different ideas to do some stuff, or be aware of this,
Right.
or get to know this company. So, facilitating them meeting different organizations throughout the city that now they work with all the time. We've done the same thing with Happen Dance, and again.
Okay.
That's the luxury of it is it's as they need it.
Right.
So like now that they're building into that they've built up to what they are, they have more volunteers, they have more stuff like that, and so they can kind of be a little more flexible. And so I almost feel like we have like a Merlin type relationship with some of the artists we work with. Like you look at Autumn now, like I keep going back to Autumn because she's a Lansing graduate who went to MSU and's like.
I interviewed her.
Right,
so,
you interviewed her. Well, and I also think too, but like that's what we want, right?
Right.
We want these artists to grow up here, create here,
Mm-hmm.
go to a local school, get their degree in what it is, and then stay here and open their business and
Right.
build this industry here.
Right.
So I reference her a lot because it's a blueprint to me. Like, what would this city look like with 100 Autumn Hopkinses?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they would define what everything is.
Right.
So, but that's kind of like just working with her, working with different artists and different organizations. Like I said, as they need it, it gives them more flexibility. And then we're there for, like when the world shuts down in March of 2020, and you had a bunch of visual artists that couldn't be in galleries anymore, right? Like there weren't
How did you
events.
guys manage that?
Well, I told everybody, I go, you're all Bob Ross now. I said, if you can't captivate on a screen, like you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
And it wasn't like good news, but it was like, to me, I'm a big fan of history too. And I study the history of the entertainment industry. To me, the pandemic for visual arts was as impactful as when the movies went from silent movies to talking pictures, because you suddenly had these actors who could go,
right.
But then they had, and their voice would sound like this, and this is how they talk, and this is what, and they're like, they had no jobs anymore.
Right.
And there was this whole, like, there was a whole big thing at MGM where they were like, we have to fire half our talent because they can't speak. And it's this Singing in the Rain's one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's literally the line in there where they're like, Lockwood and Lamont, they talk, and then you just hear her go, well, of course we talk, doesn't everybody? And then you just see just the terror on their face, like, because that's not how anybody envisioned that.
Right.
So now you look 2020, 2021, you have all these visual artists, and you look at somebody who now you put a microphone in front of them, and they're like, this is what my piece is about, and this is what this is, and this is how I do this, and you're just totally captivated. Where if it's somebody else who's like, paint, and then they go here, and you're like, okay, I'm turning it off.
That'd be me.
Right. It'd be me too. So I know how to get audience to people, but don't have me paint a picture.
I think the pandemic made a lot of people, especially creative people, become more creative as far as how they were going to adapt to their new environment, the way things were going. How did that play out for the long term in the arts industry here locally?
I think it was really good because I think another thing too about creatives, and when you have somebody who has to work for exposure and do all that stuff and constantly have roadblocks put up, when they see that road, like the pandemic was another roadblock.
Yep.
And so it was kind of just that like adaptation to, okay, what's this going to look like now? And I think the other thing the pandemic did was it made everybody else realize, like we talked earlier about necessity versus luxury.
Mm-hmm.
It made everybody realize how much we crave events and entertainment
Right.
and being
Yep.
around each other and having those physical things that you can hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
Like we did, everybody did virtual shows at the beginning and whatnot, and it was
Okay.
good. But then, like, what was it? I was talking, me and Brandon, I was doing an interview for Artist Umbrella, and I was on there with Brandon Naven, and I said back in March, I said, an artistic tsunami is coming. I said, when everything opens back up, get
Mm-hmm.
ready. I said, because there's going to be art everywhere, and you've had
Yeah.
all these artists who've had 14 months to create
Right.
because they couldn't perform or show, so they've been
Yeah.
writing songs and they've been painting pictures, and then what happened is it opened back up, and you had like Blockade in July, and you like
Right.
Afterglow Market. There's now 3 different open mics on Thursday nights in Lansing.
Wow.
They're all legit good. Like
Where at?
um, Conscious Streamers.
I
Um,
have never heard of that.
Conscious Streamers is Keontae Saxon. He's phenomenal. They're at One Love Global. Artist Umbrella is at Micah. There's a once a month open mic in Mason now.
Okay.
Morgan Madden's had a lot to do with that. Rita Vogel, who's a city council member down there. Those are happening. Like we do a Monday night show at the auditorium, which is where the collective is, which is the confusion. But we do a Monday night show there, and so there's like all these different arts events that are happening. What was it? I want to say like 2 weeks ago or something. There was like 3 different like major events. There was like Blues Fest, there was a Renaissance Festival, and there was some other festival. And the one common denominator between all of them was they all had art.
Wow.
And so I think now you're starting to see it, but now there's this saturation and explosion.
Right.
And I think now you're seeing a little bit too with like the vending events where people are kind of cutting back a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because it's the whole idea like when prohibition ended in the end of the 1920s, like I'm sure there were people that were just trashed for like 2 months, because they were just like, I haven't gotten a drink for 10 years. And I think that's kind of what happened too, is people were just like buying.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
I'd worked with a couple of artists and they were like, I'm having the biggest,
Wow.
paydays of my career.
Wow.
And it's like, so now it's like, great, now we have to, but it's maintaining that.
Right.
And, I'm going to channel my dad again. He would go, he would say there's a difference between winning your first championship and defending your championship. And I think we're in the defending part now, which is
Mhm.
kind of where it's like.
Well, winter time's coming up. People don't want to go out
Right.
necessarily,
And that
Cor-
was the thing last year. What do we do? Like when winter was coming, because we'd opened back up for a little bit, like,
right.
and we ended up doing the drive-through Carnival of the Creatives. We Opportunity Arts was the promotion production company on that, and it was, well, technically a parking ramp's not inside, but it has a roof, and it's late October. And so like those kind of adaptions and things like that, I think that's again another thing where you met people that were in traditional industries and they were like,
Yeah.
and artists were just
Yeah,
like,
they just had to shut down.
yeah, and there were
Yep.
the artists were just like, keep going. My wife's reaction to the pandemic was still one of the. So my wife is the most amazing human being in the world, and I'll fight anybody who says otherwise. But no, I always say she works her ass off so that I can go ta-da.
That's cool.
But when the pandemic hit, like she just continued, just like, yep, doing my thing. I'm going to work. I'm double essential. It's fine, whatever.
What does she do?
She is a supervisor at CVS.
Okay.
And at the time, she also worked at Home Depot.
Wow.
And everybody's like, oh, are you not taking this more seriously? And she's like, I am taking it seriously. She said, I've also lived through Hurricane Sandy and 9/11. She goes, this is just another crisis.
Right. Yep.
Which then I was like, do you need a hug? Like, but that's her just New York mentality of
Right.
like,
Well, the New York mentality, they have a really tough mind. They have a really tough mind. Like, I'm going to work. This is what I'm doing. Just because they have to live through the cold winters, right?
well, it's that too. I mean, well, in Michigan, we have to live through the cold winters. I always said
But it's not as bad.
the snow's actually worse in New
Here?
York.
Oh,
No, in New York.
Right.
Because there's nowhere to put it.
Right.
And there's 9 million people. Like
Right.
the population of New York City and the population of Michigan are the
Mhm.
same. And so like,
That's insane.
yeah,
That is insane.
yeah, we lived in, it was 7.5 square miles and 23,000 people. Yeah, it's just, yeah. And that's the other thing too. I think another thing the pandemic did was level the playing field from the big cities to the
Yep.
mid-sized markets.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of artists now, like, again, I'll mention Stefano Andreotti, who's won world championships in opera and toured Europe and everything. He moved from New York. I was telling him I played up Lansing, you know, and he moved to Lansing with his life partner in April, and she works at the Okemos Kids Club and works with that. And then he wants to do the traveling thing and stuff here. But he said, why would I pay $2,500 a month for a studio apartment in New York when I could live in Lansing and buy a home? And if I need to do a gig in New York, I'll fly to New York.
Right.
I'll drive to New York.
Right.
And he's going to be one of the features in the Columbus Day Parade in New York this year. Like, he always gets called up to do that. And I always have to explain Columbus Day in New York because I know there's Indigenous Peoples Day and there's Columbus Day. Columbus Day in New York is basically Italian St. Patrick's Day. And he's very Italian, Andreotti, you know.
Right.
And so, like, somebody are like, oh, he's doing the Columbus Day Parade. And I'm like, hold on. For him, that's a celebration of his heritage. So, but that's another thing. He's done a couple things where he's gone back to New York, back and forth since moving here. And that's how he's building that whole thing. And now, but yeah, they're looking for a house. And he's like, I'm going to be able to buy a house. Wow. Like, as an artist.
Right.
Like, that's
insane.
Yeah. Like, cause we were the head of the dance program from West Texas came up and visited me in New York, and we got with a couple other dancers that had gone to New York and were with different companies and stuff. And it was like, yeah, we're paying $600 a month for a loft, and 4 of us live in there, and it's like 2 bunks on each side.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, it just makes no sense.
You know.
And so now and social distancing is like a suggestion, like, okay, social distance, everyone go to your room. You know what I mean? Like, and so
turn and face the wall.
Right, exactly. Everyone looked like the Blair Witch Project. It was just so. But yeah, like, you have that now where, like, you can be in this mid-sized city. Like, and even here, like I always say, a Lansing artist is a Chicago artist. It just depends if you want to do you want to put in the work and do the travel. Because you look at like a company, like a dance company in New York, they do 3 or 4 shows a year. Right. You know, and that's their season. Right. And an artist here could do a show every quarter in Chicago and have a season in Chicago and never live in Chicago. Wow. So it's just that kind of.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, it's live somewhere where it takes you 20 minutes to get out of your neighborhood. And then suddenly driving's just like a whole different, like.
I was in a neighborhood last week, and I was telling my wife this. We were in a neighborhood, and it took like, it was actually 3 miles into the neighborhood, and it took like 8 turns to get to where I was going. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yep.
I couldn't imagine having to drive in New York City.
Oh, and it's not even. Oh, in New York, I mean, New York City, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't drive.
Yeah.
I've had a car in New York City one time, and I hated it. In the 9 years that I was there, that's the only time I ever took, because I'm like, I'll take public transit.
Did you have a car when you lived there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to if you live on Long Island.
Oh, okay.
But, like, the thing was like, so we were 31 miles outside of New York, and literally I would leave my house and, like, get out of the, so I'd go down the road, turn right, turn left, and you're on a main road, and then stop. And then wait to get over the hill, and then get down to the bottom, and it was just.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's so many. We went back and visited over Christmas this year and then last year, and it was funny because when we came this year, I said there are literally people that are in traffic that were in traffic last year. Like, they just haven't made it home. Like, they're just like, nah, I'm gonna pull over on the LIE. I'm done. It's great. Like, the traffic that's out there is just insane.
So, as being somebody who is a kind of a big figure in the arts community locally, what is your goals as far as having some of the talent from some of these bigger cities like New York, Chicago, LA come to Lansing and like maybe do shows and whatnot?
I think, and I currently chair the Mayor's Arts and Culture Commission, so that's one of the things that we discuss is attracting talent. Okay. And I think that you know, it's funny too, because like you do things in life that set you up for something else. And I feel like the recruiting when I was at West Texas, where it was like, we were a small program, right? Like 30 majors is not a big dance program. Yeah. But the thing is when we started recruiting, we could go to the freshmen and we could be like, you don't have to wait 4 years to get on stage. You'll be on stage next year. And so basically it was, again, my dad in Michigan, it was the idea of the Fab Five, put 5 freshmen out there and let them go. And it was the same thing with dance. And so I think that's the thing with Lansing is, okay, what can we sell to artists from New York, Chicago, and these places about Lansing? One, you can own a house and be an artist. Right. Game changer. 2, you get to define what this is going to look like. Like, if you go to New York, you're part of infrastructure that's there.
Right.
You literally get to build it in your own image here.
Right.
And it's kind of that thing of, especially if you have an entrepreneur mindset, like this is where you want to be, because there is no Lansing tradition of art that like New York has, or like Paris,
because it's
or something
untapped.
like, right.
Yeah.
And it's new, and so you're literally getting to build a new tradition
Right.
from scratch, and it's going to be designed like what Motown sound. Immediately you think of something.
Mm-hmm.
They define that.
Right.
This is our chance now in the 2020s to define that. So I think that's the thing where we talk about attracting talent from outside, and you see somebody like Stefano Andreotti.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'm like, this is step one of.
Right.
So great. One Stefano Andreotti becomes 25 Stefano Andreottis. One Autumn Hopkins becomes 50 Autumn Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this whole robust area where they're producing in Lansing, Grand Rapids, Detroit, Chicago. And it makes Lansing the creatives capital and Michigan the state of the arts.
Yeah.
Because continentally we're centered perfect.
Right.
Because I'm not sure at the time of this if like the Canadian border is open yet, but you even look at Toronto, it's 5 hours.
Yep.
Like that's where, and you go to Toronto, you can, and again, working in Chicago and Toronto and Indianapolis, you can charge Chicago, Indianapolis, and Toronto prices for your tickets and for your art, and then you can come back here,
right,
where a beer is $5. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like that was the thing when we got here. We were like, how much is a craft beer? Oh, I'm just going to pour this one out because that's just silly what you just said. So, but I think that's, to me, that's kind of the next step in this is establishing it as an industry, helping Lansing grow and build into what it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that 20 years from now, you're going to look at Lansing and associate some sort of art with it the way that you look at Seattle with grunge. We just did I had to do one of those presentation things for city council, which was really weird because they had you sit like at a table, and I totally felt like I was one of those people in front of Congress, like, oh, this sucks. But, you look at Nashville, right? It started with the Grand Ole Opry in 1925 or whatever it was, and now they're Music City, right?
Yeah.
And then Willie Nelson goes to Nashville, and basically they told him, your voice is terrible, you can't sing. Which is now we're like, it's Willie bleeping Nelson. Like a lot of people like the song Crazy that Patsy Cline sang. Willie Nelson wrote that.
Wow.
And so they were like, we love you as a songwriter. You need to be a songwriter. And he's like, but I want to play music and I want to sing. And they're like, well, it needs to sound like, and he's like, you know what, bleep you guys, I'm out. I'm going back to Texas. He goes back to Austin, Texas. They launch Austin City Limits. And then Austin is now the live music capital of the world. Yep. And in 1970, when Willie got there, they had 260,000 people, and now they have 950,000 people. Austin's the fastest growing city in the country.
It doesn't help any that during the pandemic, like Joe Rogan moved there, and then all these comedians moved there. So now it's become the comedic. I can't talk again. The comedic capital of the world. You no longer need to go to LA or New York City to do comedy.
Yep. And again, if you go back in time to 1970 and you'd have told people in Austin, this is what Austin's going to look like, they'd have been like, one, they'd have all been like, they'd had like the weed in their mouth, like in the hat on, like, what you talking about? That's Amarillo still looks like that, but that's I love to compare Lansing to Austin. Yeah, Austin's like, to me, that's our blueprint city to watch because the first cool thing, the state capitol buildings were designed by the same person.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
The capitol in D.C., the capitol in Austin, and the capitol here were all designed by the same person.
Wow.
So you have that. Lansing is politically a big blue dot in the middle of a whole bunch of red. Yeah. Austin is a big blue dot in the middle of a whole bunch of red. Lansing is a city that constantly gets to hear about the bigger cities in our state, like Grand Rapids and Detroit, and how awesome they are.
Right.
Austin is a city that gets to constantly hear about the bigger cities in their state and about how awesome Dallas and Houston are.
Right.
And so you have these similarities between the two cities. It's just that Austin has a 50-year head start on us.
Right.
And so to me, I'm like, okay, so they have a 50-year head start. They gave us a blueprint.
How to do it.
Like, it's there.
Right.
This is all we have to do. And now they have a arts and culture division within the city of Austin that's 11 city employees that are focused on arts and culture.
Wow.
And I'm like, you don't think that has something to do with how fast they're growing?
Right.
Like, come on, like, look at these cities that have embraced their arts and culture.
Yeah.
The, now, like you said, you have these comedians and all these people
Mhm.
because why? There's an industry there for it.
Right.
And so that's why I pound the table. I'm a very big supporter of community and building community,
Mhm.
but I'm also a big supporter of we have to build industry along with it. Because if we just build a community but we don't build this industry, it's just going to be a community of starving artists or
Mhm.
artists who are, just scratching and
Right.
where, you know, and it's
That's
not
ki-
just going to be art.
and that's kind of how it was before,
Hmm.
as far as the artists having to scavenge. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. This is so frustrating.
No, you're good.
That's kind of how it was before. Is artists didn't really make a whole lot of money,
Mhm.
with their artwork or whatever. So it's kind of nice to see where the community's going now, and as far as like you said, there's been artists that were able to make a living
Hmm.
this year or last year off of their work.
Yeah, and or they're able to like cut back on, the job they have. They went from being full time there to part time.
Okay.
Um, I also think there's a mindset that we need as artists to carry ourselves with a little more swagger and a little more confidence, borderline cockiness, because it's been so disrespected for so long.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
But without the art snobbiness, right?
Not the art snobbiness, but like okay, Will Pruitt, right? I don't know if you like rock music, like classic rock music.
Mm-hmm.
I call him the second coming of Seeger, because to me that's just like you hear him and he's got like this Janis Joplin type rasp to him,
Right.
but like somebody like that, like get excited about these people and understand like if you support this now, you're always going to be able to be the person to be like, dude, I saw Will Pruitt at a,
Right.
like
Right.
in a room with like 15 other people, and it's
Before
like
he was something.
right. There's a picture on the internet, and I have it saved in my phone. It's the Beatles performing at a wedding for 18 people.
Wow.
Like David Bowie started off with playing youth gatherings and weddings. Like all these massive artists that you think
Yeah.
of, they all started doing this small stuff.
Yeah, and it's important to start from nothing,
Right.
because then it shows you to appreciate where you came from,
Yep.
and that's the good thing about they're not really being a scene here locally, is that you're able to kind of create it and then grow it,
Yep.
like you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
do it in your image, and it's neat too because a lot of these young artists that I see, like it hasn't gone to their head. You know what I mean? And you look at like some of the artists we've mentioned, like Will and Stefan, they're all in their or mid to early 20s.
Wow.
And I said and again, why I go back to the sports stuff and things like that is because again, sports makes its money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We have now multiple networks dedicated to people taking takes on sports, right?
Yeah.
And they've built this up, and I think like with the arts, it's the same type thing where, you look at large business and sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say that the Anheuser-Busch sponsorship with the NFL is 2.8 billion. Something. It's 1.9 or 2.8. I can't remember. But still, it's like
Regardless.
it's yeah. The word billion is at the end, right? And that's why if you go to a stadium or something for an NFL game, you will not get Miller Lite or Coors Light products because
Right.
Bud Light, and that's why Bud Light has the first Super Bowl ad and everything like that.
Mhm.
Well, the thing is when small businesses, those small businesses like an Eagle Monk Pub and Brewery, right?
Yeah.
They're never going to be able to advertise with the NFL,
Right.
right? Because Anheuser-Busch has taken that away from them.
Right.
But when small businesses realize that they can do the same thing with the arts that big business has done with sports, I think you change everything at that point. Like breweries putting the artist's work on the labels, right?
Wow.
Why is your when you go into Horrocks and you have the can wall,
Right.
right? I know a couple of artists that I work with that I'd be like, make your can stand out. And they'd be like, got it. And then you just see it and you're like, I don't even know what this is. Like there's some cans they don't even write. Like you're like, it could be a stout, it could be an IPA, surprise. But the artwork's cool.
Right.
And so I think
this is something that's being done right now?
this is something I'd like to see done. I think it's done very, very like every here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they still do it on, submit this for a contest.
Right.
Which I have issue with, but then again, I also am one of those people like you get in what you put out of it, right? Where, yeah, if a company, because we had a brewery about, I was going to say middle of the pandemic, was like, hey, we want to have artists submit for these labels for this series. Cool. The winner gets X amount of dollars, and it wasn't a good amount. But what I had said to a couple of the artists that I knew applied, I said, yeah, you apply for this one, but now you have the blueprint for the 300 breweries that are in this state.
Right.
So you go to them
Right.
and you say, hey, do you have a new series coming out? Yeah, we're about to introduce some sour beers. Cool. Do you need artwork for those sour beer cans? Yeah. Because a lot of times they aren't thinking about it. You know what I mean? They're
Right.
just like, they're thinking
Wow.
about, I want to make good beer. And so I think those kind of things, restaurants, like your ticket to a lug nut game gets
Mhm.
you a free appetizer at Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever it is.
Right.
Let's do the same thing with your ticket to the symphony. Get you a dessert at Social Sloth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's where, like, I feel like I'm yelling into the ether of like, we just need to do that. Like, here's everything. Like, let's just do this. You know, and if nothing else, if we swing and fail, right, we're right where we were.
That's right.
So
Have you tried talking to anybody about this? How's that going?
a little bit, good-ish. You know, it's funny too because like for me, like I said, it's mom, pop, and a hamster wheel. There's a lot of things that like I totally feel like my life is Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins, where like during the day I'm like playing every instrument and dancing with cartoon penguins, and then at 9 o'clock at night during the week, and a lot of people don't know this, but I work at Home Depot 20 hours a week freight team, and you know that's me being a chimney sweep. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like so now I'm at Home Depot and like so there's a lot of stuff that I want to do more on myself, but also I think it's a crossroads for Opportunity Arts too, where now we need to start to expand out and have other people that are, you know, in the company and in the organization
Right.
doing stuff to expand that. But I think we can get there.
Do you find that Opportunity Arts you'll be able to go full time with it anytime soon?
I'm hoping so.
You're hoping so.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. That's the goal. So,
Yeah.
um, we'll probably always have something because my wife's type 1 diabetic and we need medical
Mhm.
benefits,
Right.
you know? But yeah, the goal for me for Opportunity Arts is I want Opportunity Arts to be the WWE of the arts. Like I want people to feel like, man, I'm going to make a living. I'm going to be over there with them,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Essentially, you guys are like an agent for artists.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically, yeah, I've been called a sports agent for artists, which one time totally blew up in my face because somebody
Oh my
heard
gosh.
sports agent for artists and they were like, time to audition. And I'm like, we're at a show. You're being disrespectful. Don't do that. But yeah, no, it's funny because I'm like the sports agent or the GM or it's probably the other field I would work in if I didn't do arts.
Sports.
Is I want to be in sports management.
Yeah.
Or that kind of stuff. I just love.
I mean, you'd probably be able to do it easily. Just
I'd enjoy
switch
it.
on over.
I'd enjoy it, but of course I'd be crazy and be like, I want to go work for the Lions because that'd be the hardest thing, you know what I mean? And then we're gonna be like the Patriots tomorrow, and then we all saw how that worked out. That was terrible. That was a terrible idea. Let's just hire all the Patriot people. No, don't do that. But I think I don't know. I love the Lions, but I think at some point, like you just go, well,
It's the Lions.
it's the right. Like everybody was. My brother texted me about the game that we just had against the Ravens. There's no penalty called on the delay of game, and he kicks the record longest field goal, which by the way was broken. Tom Dempsey had the record, and he kicked it against the Lions back in like the 70s or whatever. And so, but it's like, have you ever seen the Lions lose like that? And I was like, yes, all the time. That was the most Lions thing I've ever seen. But you know, one day, you know, I mean, the Cubs won a World Series, right? Like,
yeah. If we don't see the Lions, or if we see the Lions win, then we think something's up.
yeah, if it'll be the greatest party in the history of the state.
We might
When the
set
Lions
couches
win.
on fire just in
Well,
celebration.
I'll set myself on fire. No, I'm just kidding. But no, because that's the one. Like, I asked my dad. My dad's 75. I was like, "You think you'll see it in your lifetime?" He goes, "No." And he shot it right down. I was like, "No." He's like, "As many rebuildings as I've seen." But no, I just, you know, I'm hoping one day they win one because it would just be like, I'm not greedy. I'm not like
I want to
come
win
on.
them all.
9 and 18 years like Brady. No, I'm okay. Just one.
Do you get involved in local sports at all? Like maybe the Lugnuts, or don't they have a soccer team now?
They had a soccer team.
had a
They
soccer
had an
team.
Ignite.
Okay.
We actually have a semi-pro football team, the Lansing Lightning. Autumn's boyfriend Josh plays for that.
Really?
For them, he's the kicker.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Where do they play at?
It's like a park. It's like just a regular park in like South Lansing.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
real sure where, but they play like they made it to the championship. They won the championship last year and then made it to the championship this year.
Wow.
They play teams from Toledo and Detroit and
Oh,
other
wow.
things. So we have that. There's a semi-pro basketball league or team or something that's we have. So we have a lot of minor league sports here too.
Yeah.
I'm not as involved because free time is not a luxury that I enjoy. Like I'm to the point now where if I have free time, I panic because I'm like,
what am I forgetting?
Why do I have free time? I shouldn't have free time. What am I? Yeah, and then obviously ADHD. I'm like, oh my god, like I'm definitely forgetting something, and then that's why again my wife is so amazing is because she is that
She's
solid
the glue
foundation
that holds you together.
So like with the budgeting, like we do budgeting and stuff like that, like she's phenomenal at all that stuff, all the number stuff.
That's cool.
I am not a math guy. I'm not like any of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like
That's
I'm
cool.
more. Well, I think what I do well is I find an audience and I go, this is the audience that's going to like this person's stuff.
You're good at putting the stuff together, and she's good at holding everything together.
Yes, she defends the castle while I march the army. So that's kind of our relationship. But like even when I was in New York, there's a company there called Ballet Deviare, and that was kind of one of those things when we started our own thing and started to work with all these different companies, where like you realize how you have to be able to adapt and that like you can't just every arts organization can't just go this is how we promote art because you'll fail. So like you look at Ballet Deviare, their dancers are as talented as the dancers in New York City Ballet and ABT because New York City Ballet and ABT can't hire everybody, right?
Right.
So you have these thousands of phenomenal, exceptional dancers
They go elsewhere.
that go to these other little companies in New York or something like that, and you have Ballet Deviare who has these amazing dancers. They dance classical ballet, but Ballet Deviare only dances to death metal.
Wow.
Classical ballet to death metal. That's it. Yes, you can YouTube them.
I gotta look that up.
Yes, just type in death metal ballet.
Okay.
And it'll pop up. And it's amazing because you're like, I'm watching ballet, but it's literally like it's
interesting.
And so when I first met them, my thought was, okay, the New York City Ballet audience, the people that go to Lincoln Center and go to the Met and these places, this is not that audience. You know what I mean? So I looked at, okay, who goes to Rocky Horror? Who watches Metalocalypse? What social media groups love metal music? Things like that. That's who you have to start hitting.
Right.
So that's kind of what I always look at is, okay, because I'll never tell an artist, no, do something else. Do that. I'm like, whatever you're creating, it's my job to be good enough at what I do to go, okay, let's find an audience for that.
So you had mentioned kind of at the beginning that somebody who paints a picture or, and might call themselves an artist might not be an artist. What in your definition is an artist? What would qualify them to you as an artist? So
let me be clear, because sometimes this is like it's a tricky subject, and it gets some people get a little upset. I think anybody who wants to do art, while I always, it's not artist or not artist, it's hobbyist versus professional.
Okay.
So if I want to go out and throw a football outside, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a football player, even though I played in high school.
You're retired.
It's just I'm retired. There you go. Never made $1 doing it, but I'm retired. But it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of artists that are hobbyists, and doing that, if that's your hobby, awesome. And if you want to do art every single night and you never want to sell a piece and you just want to do it, and that's what fulfills you as a human being, awesome. Because you know what? You're going to be a fan. So when I'm going to sell tickets to my art gallery show, you're going to be somebody who's going to spend money to go see that.
Right.
So I want as many people enthusiastic and doing art as possible. I think I'm very pro, and I don't know how you fund it, but I think there's a way we can figure it out. I'm very pro universal arts education, so that anyone who ever picks up a paintbrush as a kid, if they're like, this is what I want to do, there's an avenue for them to do that. Right. Eventually you get to a point, and this is coming from a dance background, okay? So there's ballet shoes, and then there's point shoes. Point shoes are when you go up actually on the point, and it's on a wooden block, and you dance up on these blocks. And it is extremely dangerous, and you will hurt a person for the rest of their life if you put them in point too early. If they're not ready to be on point and you put them on point.
What's the age?
It's not an age. It's an ability level. Oh. It's not an age at all, because if you start late, you can't be like, well, I'm 30, I can,
Right.
It's an ability level, and your feet and your legs and your muscles have to be strong enough to do that.
Okay.
Well, if you're somebody who teaches dance and you didn't go and get the certificates in, the qualifications to do that, right? And you just taught at your local dance studio in Nowheresville, Indiana, right?
Yeah.
And then you're deciding, hey, you're good enough. I'm going to put you on point because the parents are like, oh, I just want to see my kid in point shoes. And you're like, okay, well, you spend money with me. I'm going to do.
Right.
And you put the kid in point shoes. You're literally going to screw that kid's feet up for the rest of their life. They will have feet and leg and muscle bone issues because they're still growing. So if you don't know what you're doing, you're hurting people. And I think obviously that's different than drawing a stick figure. But like for me, like I would get visibly mad when we would see it at a dance competition. And those judges were like, this kid shouldn't be on point. And some of the teachers were like, how dare you? And it's like, you're hurting them. And so that's, I think, why I get on a soapbox like that. I think, again, anyone should be able to do art. Anyone should have, and youth should have education, universal access to it. But once you hit that level of, this is what I do for a living. This is what's going to send my kids to college and feed me and get my house. Like, there has to be a level of quality, and there has to be a level where you go, this is substantially better than this. And some people don't like that's
right.
But I feel it's a reality of, I can't do what Tom Brady does. I'd love to. I can't do what John Cena does. I'd love to. I can't. I'll be fans. I still root for the Lions. There's no good reason on earth why I should root for that team. But I'm a fan.
Right.
And so yeah, that's kind of my stance on it. And other people will have their own opinions and everything, but that's for me, and just from working in different markets and stuff around the country, that's just how I feel about it. Like,
I think that's a pretty fair stance. I mean, like you had said, it's kind of like playing a sport. If it's not something you do, if you don't exercise regularly, if you're not out there hustling to make money from it, then it's not really, I mean, I guess you're not, I don't know if I would hate to say somebody's not an artist, because you're doing the act of an artist, right? But you're not putting in the work to sell it and to make a living from it, like you had mentioned.
Well, and here's where I think, and again, there's like that the term, an artist, right? And we'll go back to the necessity thing of the plumber, right? The plumber can do the plumbing.
Right.
And so what happens is the reason I feel that you have people ask artists to do stuff for exposure, or, oh, well, it's going to help the community, so you're not getting paid, but isn't it great? And we're going to give you a platform, is because there's this disrespect of, well, anybody's an artist, right? So if you let everyone in, you automatically defeat value. You know what I mean? Because there's not a value to this person is doing this and it's special.
Right. Because anybody can do it.
Because anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And I think because this industry has been disrespected for so long, that we need to say, look, this is substantially good, and not being elitist, and I think when we talked about the future of Lansing, like, again, we don't have that tradition. Right. So like, we can build it the right way, where it is inclusive, where we do give opportunity to everyone from every walk of life and every background and everything, right? We have a chance to build that up now, but we also need to remember too that like there is a little bit of merit that goes in there.
Right.
And, somebody who, you look at I'm trying to think now, like, you hear Stefano sing, and, people want to take classes from him because he's done it. He's won world championships. He's been featured on television. You look at different dancers and stuff that you want to train with and learn from. They've accomplished that. Like when I was marketing for Gelsey Kirkland Ballet in New York, that was the last company I worked for before I started my own business. Like if you watch PBS, the Nutcracker on PBS every Christmas, the woman that plays Clara, the little girl that plays Clara, that's Gelsey Kirkland. She's now like an old woman. Wow. She's still amazing. Like, and that was like, for me, it was weird. Like, it was like the starstruck thing of like, she'd come in, Mike, and I'd be like, Gelsey Kirkland knows my first name. Awesome. Like, because and you look at like those kids that get to take from her, like, you get to take from Gelsey Kirkland. Like, that's crazy.
That's cool.
I met Gene Kelly's wife. It was like one of the most amazing moments of my life, because like I was a little kid. I wrote him, and I was like, Gene Kelly was the lead in Singing in the Rain. I don't know if everybody knows him, but like, big hero of But I wrote him a letter as a kid. And he sent back an autographed picture,
Wow.
and like I took it to her, and I'm like, and she's like, "That's his." She's like, "Yep." She like
Wow.
verified it, and it was just like just to get to meet her, like that was one of the things.
That is awesome.
There's been a lot of cool stuff that I've gotten to do from just this work.
Yeah.
Like, so New York Public Library for the Performing Arts is at Lincoln Center, and we ended up doing a piece. We were working with Dave Alois Farron there, and she wanted to contact the library about how they archive their work, because she did a piece called "Time to Talk," which is about systemic racism within the arts. From what color do we call nude? What color are nude tights? And the way lighting plots hit certain bodies and bodies and skin types. And she wanted to do. We wanted to talk about how are they archiving, because they had tons of archive from ballet, because ballet archives well. But street dance, break dance, modern, all that stuff, they were a little bit behind on. And Dava wanted to talk to them, and we went in and talked to them, and they ended up giving us a private tour of the archive, the New York Performing Arts Archive. And so, like, Balanchine's choreography notes.
Wow.
And, like I literally was just, like, I my mouth open, like, this is every piece of dance history, like, ever. And it was just, like, yeah,
and
just
that's
to
not
see
something they do regularly?
No, we had come in and it was one of the jobs I got to do for one of my artists. Dava reached out to me, and she said, and we had been working together. Dava Alois Farron Dance, huge plug. I would love if you get a chance to check her out. She's amazing. Dance Magazine named her one of the top 7 black dance artists to have on your radar.
Wow.
She's performed at Martha's Vineyard.
She's from New York?
She's from New York. She's from Jamaica originally. She did a piece called Consider Water, because she didn't have access to clean water as a child. And so one of my jobs for her was I need to connect with with somebody from the Jamaican consulate. And so we ended up, like, I'm writing people at the UN, like, and so we ended up, she said, I want a dance historian, and me, go for the biggest home run you can hit. I'm like, New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. And it was literally an email to Linda Murray, who's the curator. And I said, Dave is doing this project. This is what she wants to do. She'd like to reach out for a dance historian. Maybe you have some ideas. Because I'm like, if they can't, they'll know who can.
Right.
I get a call the next morning at 8:30, and it's Linda Murray. And she's like, what do you need? I want to help. What do you need? And we were like, holy. And so, like, she came and, like, spoke at a panel and stuff like that. So that's kind of the weird. And then that's how she was like, well, you guys need to come to the library. And then Dava got to perform at Lincoln Center.
Wow.
Through that whole thing. And it was just like this is my job, you know?
Right.
And it's just one of those cool things where, like, you have those experiences and those opportunities that you wouldn't normally get.
Right.
And since then, since talking to Dava, they've totally switched up their how they look at archiving, and they ended up purchasing the Bill T. Jones archive, which is the largest African American dance archive. That's now, and it will always be there and protected.
Wow.
And I looked at Dava and I said, be the change you want to see in the world.
That is so cool.
And I was like, we could drop dead tomorrow, and our dance industry is better off because we exist in it.
Right.
You know? And that's what I want on my tombstone is I left it better than I found it. That's it.
I like that. So we're going to wrap this up here soon. We're an hour and 22 minutes in.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. I enjoy listening to you talk about the arts community because I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not really an artist, so
come in. Come check it out.
I will.
Be a fan.
I am a fan. I'm a fan of art. I was gonna ask you a question. My question was, so if there's a young person watching this or listening to this locally, and they want to join, they want to come in, be a part of, they want to be an artist, they aspire to be an artist, what would your recommendation be to them? What would your words of inspiration be?
Start taking workshops from some of the artists that are in their 20s now that were you 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Have that person that you aspire to be. And that's the great thing about here is you can take classes from those people, you know? And so that's, I would say, get to know who's here locally, who you like, connect with companies like Opportunity Arts, the Artists Umbrella, and the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center. Go to the Poetry Room. Like, go start immersing yourself in all this stuff. Because that's the thing, I think, like for me, I always liked seeing somebody that I wanted to pattern myself after. And even now in business, I have my Mount Rushmore of promotion. And it's P.T. Barnum, George M. Cohan, Vince McMahon, and David Geffen, and those are my 4. Like that, I'm like, if I can do like that, you know, and being a dancer, like watching Gene Kelly, like that was I want to be a dancer because Gene Kelly did dance. So that's where here you don't. If you're a singer, you don't have to be like, oh my God, I want to be whoever. You can go work with these people.
Right.
So that's what I would say is find out more stuff. Follow. You just had Sarah Pierce on 517 Living because all your events are going to be on there. That's going on. Go to an open mic. Just sit and enjoy it and learn, and your world will get a whole lot bigger.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've had a lot of artists on, and it's tremendous knowing that we have all these people who are super talented here in our local community. Because I mean, through me talking to them, I'm learning all kinds of things about the art community. Like I had Sema on. She was at the not Opportunity Arts, the Artist Umbrella for a while. But she read a piece of poetry in it, like on the podcast, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. I'm like, this is amazing.
Well, shameless plug, we got a guy, Morgan Madden. Are you familiar with him?
No.
He does a piece called An Ode to the 517.
Okay.
And it's literally, I'm like, that's an anthem. Like, that's what you hear before you go into battle. And he's a phenomenal poet. And, you know, like, there's so many things, too, about, like, the different genres that we have. You know, being from Peoria, Illinois, it's 112,000 people. So 5,000 people or whatever it is, less than what's here.
Right.
But, like, they're not pumping out. They might have like 5 household name people where you're like, oh, I know that artist.
Why do you think that
per
is?
Genre. It's an anomaly. I really there's no explaining.
You think it's because Detroit's here, Grand Rapids, like all these kind of these cities that art came out of.
Maybe
Chicago's not that far.
Maybe, but like you even look at Mason. You look at Mason. Mason's not a big town.
Right.
Morgan's from Mason. Sarah Sanders is from Mason. Christine Brickey's from Mason. Will Pruitt's from Mason. Like there's and I'm forgetting people. Like it's just, to me, it's and I think that's the thing is they're so dedicated to it. And I think now what's cool is a lot of them, it's like, I joke that I sometimes feel like the Wizard of Oz at the end of the movie where he's like, Scarecrow, you've had a brain this whole time. Like, Tin Man, you're the most caring person. You've had a heart this whole time. Like, and I think now that they start to realize, oh, like, yeah, I should be proud of what I've done. You know what I mean? Like, I am this good. And so I think now you're seeing this confidence build, which I think is good because, again, a famous Michigan artist once said RESPECT. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think that's a thing, too.
Who was it?
Oh, Aretha Franklin.
Oh.
I'll go back to Motown. Those are Michigan artists.
Yep.
You know? Stevie Wonder went to the School of the Blind here in Lansing. Like, he's one of ours.
Yeah.
You know, like, these were all artists that if local was as focused on back then as it is now, they're local Michigan artists, right? So this is that next wave of that's coming. And I hate the term local celebrity, but I like the term local artistic influencer. And I think that's what we have now in a lot of these artists that are here. So I think the confidence is good because, again, they're starting to be like we have artists now that they'll come to somebody and be like, hey, we're going to give you $500 for a mural. Like, isn't that great? And they're like, that wall's a $7,000 wall.
Wow.
Like, for supplies and the work and the labor, you want me to paint that? It's $7,000. Wow. That's what market is. I'll give you a break. I'll do it for $5,000. But like, you can already see there's a disconnect.
Right.
Which another thing, whole nother concept of, you know, sometimes like the people that are like, well, I'll do the whole wall for $500.
Right. Yeah.
That's not helping.
Those are people struggling who don't know their worth.
Right. And it's like, man, no, tell them to, you know, because they'll come back. And it's funny too, because, and I'll shut up. But even with booking artists, like I'll talk to different people from festivals and they'll be like, oh, we'd love to have an artist do this thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I used to say, what's your art budget? What's your budget for artists? Oh, well, you know, it'll be great marketing for them and blah, 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 right? Not interested. And I've told them, I've been like, and so I've started to use what's your entertainment budget because they view, oh yeah, well, I'd have to pay for entertainment.
Right.
And so literally they're like, we want to have 4 visual artists do something. Cool. What's your entertainment budget? we could do like 250, we could do like 5, you know what I mean? Like suddenly
Right.
there's money that I know had I said, what's your art budget?
Right.
It wouldn't have been there.
Right.
And sometimes I'll be like, what's your entertainment budget? And they're like, oh, we don't have one. And I'll go, then you don't get entertainment. I kind of like being the bad cop for my artists, where it's like, yeah, no, I'll tell them. I have no problem being like, nope, add a 0. So
Does the artist get mad about that?
no, not when they add a 0.
Yeah.
Because we had the same thing happen when an artist in New York. We had them. The venue wanted them to sign. They were like they wanted to give them a nice amount of money for 2 nights. It was a very nice. It was over $5,000 for 2 nights of performing.
Wow.
Awesome, right? Until in the 60-page contract that they sent the artist, that the artist paid me to go through, because the artist doesn't have time to do all that. They sent him a 60-page artist that most artists would be like, I'm getting this one. They're signing.
Right.
They're not even questioning. Right? So I'm going through the 60-page contract and I see the artist is not allowed to perform within a 75-mile radius of New York City 6 months prior or 6 months after the engagement.
What?
And that's where my add a 0 came from, because I said that's they're taking your ability to make money away for a year.
Right.
And I get it. They don't want you to go across the street and perform.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right.
But
not really.
It's right. Like I'm the kind of like I hate no compete clauses, and sometimes you have to, like with subcontractors and things like that. But like that was egregious to me. Like you're in New York City, you understand this is a gig economy.
Right.
Like you can't do this.
Yeah.
And so literally that was my negotiation. I was like, you need to add a 0. And I said, because this artist has already been featured, and it was like they'd been on the art section of the cover of the art section of the New York Times. Like you're getting as good of this as they are.
Right.
And it ended up, it was the only time they'd ever negotiated a contract where they were like, okay, well, fine. They can do the rest of their season, but don't add any more extra performances in New York during that time. So they got to do their whole season. And then what we did is we went, fine, what's every university outside of that between 75 and 100,000 miles? And we booked a tour for those universities at the same time. And then when that 6 months ended after the engagement, because I was like, there's no way that you're not going to, like it's egregious. I'm still like, you can see me.
Yeah.
Like I'm still getting to the point where I'm like, how dare you? Yeah, so I don't want to go 2 hours.
I definitely think
I could talk to you for 2 hours.
I definitely think we should have you back on to kind of talk about these things, because I think that's really important. That's something I didn't know. I think that's something Autumn was also talking about on here, how there's an inequity with women getting paid as compared to men and whatnot, but that's a whole nother subject. So kind of wrapping this up, how can people get a hold of you? How can they come to the Artist Umbrella and the Art Collective?
So all the different, because all Artist Umbrella.
What are all the different art businesses or groups here in Lansing?
There's so many. Now we're going 2 hours. No, I'm just kidding. No, there's a lot of them. Artist Umbrella, check out. It's a great variety show. You're going to get to see a lot of artists all at once. There's the Poetry Room. If you're a big fan of poetry, it's a open mic. If you want to go read there, that's a great one. We have Monday Night Masterpiece, which is at the Auditorium, which is connected to Cedar Street Art Collective. So Cedar Street Art Collective is basically a studio space at the old Dicker and Deal. Sarah Sanders is in there. Andrew Sandstedt's in there. He's done the butterfly sculpture in Rio Town and the Phoenix in Old Town. And so there's all these different places you can go and check out. And the Arts Council is a great place to connect with. And then obviously Opportunity Arts. The website's opportunityarts.org. We're good at connecting you again with like the different artists, because like we have this huge roster of over 50 affiliates that Autumn, Natalie, Artist Umbrella, Cedar Street. So I think coming to us, you can that's going to be like your doorway into all of these other groups. And then shameless plug for our place. Come check out the Auditorium. Monday Night Masterpiece is basically it's kind of like the Tonight Show meets Austin City Limits. And basically we do like art presentations and an interview. Because I'm a big believer in you buy from who you like. So the more you get to, and that's what national celebrities do, is they go on the late night talk shows.
Right.
They're not there because they want to hang out with Stephen Colbert.
Right.
That's what we want to do. They're there because they're going to plug their next movie or plug their next project or come to the zoo or whatever it is.
Or go on a podcast and talk about their business.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. That's why I love like you being here and having this platform and things like that, because like coming from New York, you didn't have just the New York Times. You had New York Times, the Newsday, the big ones, but then you had Village Voice, Tribeca Tribune. You know, you had all the different podcasts and all the different media outlets. You know, and when people go, well, Lansing only has City Pulse and the Lansing State Journal and the 3 TV stations. I'm like, no. I'm like, they have the Palm Reader, and they have Rising Above podcast, and they have Michigan Reimagined with Chris Buck, and Every Damn Day with Jerry North. Like, there's all these different media outlets.
Yep.
And, you know, if somebody's not covering you and you want to go somewhere else, like, this is a great way to reach. And that's the thing, too, is it's building up this media industry that we have.
Yep.
Because, you know, a lot of the stories that I've heard from people that are on your show, I may not have heard had they not come on here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they're not on WLNS or they're not on one of the big TV stations. And so Palm Reader's another one. Sarah Spohn and Jeremy Cohn, who run that, they do a great job with bringing light to stuff that isn't necessarily.
I have to check that one out.
They're good. Sarah Six Jobs, that's her nickname.
Okay.
She's a badass. That's the big compliment. If I call you a badass, that's my big compliment for you. But she does great work with them. Jeremy Cohn does as well. There's others I'm forgetting, but like that's the media industry here, you know. And for somebody like you, like being able to feature these artists and stuff like that, like that's huge for their career. Because now that we have social media, we have their own websites and things like that, like that can live forever on there. And I know a lot of artists are now, like I told Autumn the other day, you need to have a press page for your website. I was like, because now, like, I mean, you've seen it. She's everywhere. Yeah. I'm like, you have to have it.
She's been on the news like twice since I interviewed her.
Yeah, she's just all over the place, and that's, you know, and now she's up for Top of the Town for City Pulse for Top Artist, and it's like, you know, but that's the next step is now you have that, and then now you need to have a press kit.
Right.
Because now it's that next step up is, and I've told her, 2022, you need to start looking at the other cities, and you need to have all your stuff ready to go, hey, I want to come up to Traverse City for a weekend. Here's my press kit. Here's all the stuff I've done. Here's why you should pay me to come up there.
Something I think is real cool too is about like, you know, like me interviewing like Autumn, let's say, you know, somebody can see her on the news and be like, oh, I kind of like her art, but it's like a quick snippet of what she actually does. But when they see her come in here and talk and tell her story as to what inspires her, and they get to kind of know who she is as a person. Yep. And then they might be like, oh, I want to follow her on social media, or, you know, I want to buy artwork from her to help her along. And it's just a whole process of building everybody up. Yep.
Well, and it's final pop culture reference. The news is the trailer to the movie that is Rising Above podcast. You know what I mean? Like you come on here and you get the whole thing. Right. Whether you want 2 hours of it or
not. Right. Yeah, and that's one thing too is like, I mean, we're kind of going on a rabbit trail now, but
I think we started on a rabbit trail. So
people always ask me like, what's you know your audience like? Do you have a lot of listeners? Or I'm like, I don't really care. You know, like I'm talking to you. Some people might like it. Some people might not. Yeah. They'll just not watch it, I guess, if they don't like it.
Yep. So I know some of my coworkers that get through their nights at Home Depot at Freight Team by themselves listening to podcasts. Yeah. Because that's their, you know. Yeah. Like, and that's the thing now. You can go to work, you can listen to a podcast, you drive somewhere. You know, if you have to do a gig in Chicago, it's a 3-hour trip.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I do when I'm at work. I just pop in podcasts and I listen to them all day long. I can get through like 20 podcasts in a day.
Yeah. I listened to your initial one today, and then a little bit of Natalie's, and I listened to Sarah's the other day. Yeah. You know, prepping. But yeah, no, it's like, and that's, you know, just I forget where it popped up, but I saw your podcast pop up, and immediately I was like, there's another platform. Yeah. You know?
And that's one thing that's cool about social media is that it's a tool in all aspects, right?
Right.
Kind of like the 517 page. That's a tool, and that's the way I look at it. It's a tool for me to promote the podcast, to promote other people who I have on the podcast. So yeah, it just kind of builds everybody up.
It's funny too, because I've said to somebody before, I was like, could you imagine what, like, because again, I look back at my heroes, like, could you imagine what P.T. Barnum and the circus could have done with social media? Like how many people they would get. I mean, they'd get 5,000 people inside the tent for one of those things. Yeah. He would send people to town a week early to kind of plug the show or whatever. Like, I'm like, you give social media to somebody like that, like he would literally think we're all cheating. And again, Barnum had his faults. Yeah. But like those people from that era that didn't have this, I'm like, man. Yeah. And again, you're an individual artist now. Like I love listening to Dave Grohl just talk about like, You want to you're happy this thing doesn't, or you want this thing to exist, make it.
Yep.
You want to have a rock magazine, make it. Like,
I
just
like that mentality.
do it. Yeah, he did a whole big thing at South by Southwest. And again, South by Southwest, another reason that Austin is what it is.
Yeah.
Do you know the Capital City Film Festival is one of the top 25 film festivals in the world?
Really?
Yep. Or in the country, one of the two.
Wow.
Either way, bragging rights, Lansing. Ivan Eiler, who's an artist from here who did Portrait of a Dreamer downtown, you
Okay.
can see him right now on Netflix on Metal Shop Masters.
Oh wow,
Like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's another thing that drives me crazy. Like, no one's covered Ivan, and I'm like, dude, he's been on like.
Do you have his
Yeah, I'll
contact
call him right now and get him. Do it live, no, but
I want to have him on.
yeah, he's bad at it, and he's real cool, and he's got this voice that I just want him to narrate everything. Like, he's just got this like, hello, my name is Ivan. And it's like, it's so deep and just like they're just like, wow. Like, I listen to him and I'm like, I just feel better. So, yeah, man, there's a lot of cool stuff.
There is, yeah.
And thank you for putting a light on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here, and thank you for adding me to your press, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, man. This is fun.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah.
I definitely want to have you back.
Yeah,
so,
you bet. Let me know.
Yeah.
All right.
All
I don't know if the listeners will, but we'll try to keep it short next time.
No.
No. You're right.
All right. Thank you for being
All right.
here.
Yeah, you bet.